Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 4 2025 NFL predictions. Well, for the Fanatic this week, it was another good week. I was able to stay 500 or above 500 in both my against the spread and straight up predictions, which I will gladly take that. But it was not let's just say, an improvement from the week before. I went 9-7 and 13-3 this week, especially how the week ended. I went on a little bit of a downturn with my picks in the afternoon and evening windows of the games. So against the spread and straight up, last week I went 500 against the spread, broke even with money 8-8, and straight up I went 10-6. So with how the week went, and how all the games happened, all the craziness. Congratulations to the Cleveland Browns for having their Super Bowl in Week 3 of the 2025 season by beating the Green Bay Packers in a stunning 13-10 comeback when they were down 10 points with about 4 minutes to go. Jordan Love threw a terrible interception that got them to go in, get into touchdown range. So many pass interference and holding calls that let the Browns keep moving the football through that situation. And also, quick shout out to special teams play, because my goodness, where there's so many blocked kicks and missed field goals this weekend, it was crazy to watch. But that was one of the games I lost. Houston, Jacksonville, one where I had the Texans losing their first 2 games, but I actually didn't think they'd lose to Jacksonville. And Texans defense has played very well, holding their opponents to 14, 20, and 17. The problem is that they've scored 9, 19, and 10. That offense cannot move the ball to save their life. But it was, that was one of the losses. Cardinals, Niners, what a game that was. Back and forth. And I am so mad at Zay Jones. Hey, buddy, you cost us. You cost every prognosticator out there. I'm talking about you mid-level bum. You cost us the game. Both on the spread. Well, I guess technically I have to give him credit. He did get the spread one for us because the spread was, I think, 1.5. So, but that bum cost us the game, because if he literally catches that ball on the 3rd and 9, the Cardinals win, and the Cardinals get the 3-0 in a game where they basically stole defeat in the jaws of victory. So that's what I am, curious about that. And then the other couple games, the only 2 I really can't defend is Cowboys-Bears. That was a nutty game to where that game basically ended when CeeDee Lamb twisted his ankle. He's out the next 3 to 4 weeks with that ankle injury. And I objectively think the Cowboys are going to be in trouble. Or, well, their offense is going to be in trouble. Fortunately, they play some bad teams coming up. So even with that offense having its struggles, they could play well. But essentially, the Cowboys' defense is the worst defense in football. Or maybe them and the Baltimore Ravens after what happened last night. But I'll get to that during the video. But that might be the worst defense in football, because they can't generate a pass rush to save their life. They could not tackle. There were wide open coverages. Ben Johnson's throwing 4th and 3 touchdown passes to wide open players, and they just absolutely steamrolled the Dallas Cowboys defensively, once again. And then the other one, Falcons-Panthers. Kudos to the Panthers. Massive problem for the Falcons, but I'll get into that. But like I said, against the spread, 8-8, straight up 10-6. So overall for the year, through 48 games against the spread, I am still 3 games under 500 at 22, 25, and 1. Straight up now for the year, I am 34-14. So I am dropping. I am still happy about the 71%, which is still on a higher pace than I usually am. But it is kind of disappointing to go from 75 in week 2 to 71. Like, I am going in the wrong direction. Hopefully this week, with all the picks I make, hopefully I can continue to go in the right direction in that way. But what a wild week for the league. And let me get right into my week 4 predictions. So, on Thursday, when the 2-1 Seattle Seahawks travel to Arizona to take on the 2-1 Arizona Cardinals in a surprisingly competitive NFC West battle, the Seattle Seahawks are 1-point dogs in this game. Give me Seattle here, +1, and Seattle straight up. Then the next game, the first international game, the first game in NFL history to be played in Dublin, Ireland, when the 2-1 Minnesota Vikings travel to, or take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are designated the home team. The Minnesota Vikings are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Minnesota here, -2.5, and Minnesota straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-1 Washington Commanders travel to Atlanta to take on the 1-2 Atlanta Falcons. The Washington Commanders are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Washington here, -2.5, and Washington straight up. And once again, even though I know Jaden Daniels was out last week, I do expect I will take the Commanders and the spread, regardless if it's Marcus Mariota again or Jaden Daniels starting at quarterback against the Falcons. All right, then the next game, when the 0-3 New Orleans Saints travel to Buffalo, and the biggest spread of the NFL season so far, the Buffalo Bills are 16.5-point favorites in this game. I am going to give the Saints a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I think they should play better, and also just from what I saw, I took the Bills last week as a 12.5-point favorite, and they couldn't cover that against a equally bad team in the Miami Dolphins. So I will take Buffalo here to win straight up, but I will take the Saints to cover a 16.5-point spread. New Orleans plus 16.5. Then the next game, when the 1-2 Cleveland Browns travel to Detroit to take on the 2-1 Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are favored by 7.5 points in this game. Give me Detroit here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Cleveland to cover plus 7.5. Then the next game, when the 1-2 Carolina Panthers travel to New England to take on the 1-2 New England Patriots. The New England Patriots are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me New England here -5.5, and New England straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-0 Los Angeles Chargers travel to New York to take on the 0-3 New York Giants. The Los Angeles Chargers are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me Los Angeles here -6, and Los Angeles straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-0 Philadelphia Eagles travel to Tampa Bay in a battle of undefeated teams to take on the 3-0 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 3.5-point dogs in this game. In this game, I'm going to take a hedge here. I'm going to take Tampa Bay here plus 3.5. And I'm going to take Philadelphia straight up. Then the next game, when the 0-3 Tennessee Titans travel to Houston to take on the 0-3 Houston Texans. What a crazy AFC South battle to have in a battle of 0-3 teams. Nobody expected the Houston Texans to be in this conversation. The Houston Texans are 7-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Houston here to win straight up, but give me Tennessee plus 7. Then the next game, when the 3-0 Indianapolis Colts travel to Los Angeles to take on the 3-0 or 2-1 Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Los Angeles here -3.5, and Los Angeles straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-1 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to San Francisco to take on the 3-0 San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me San Francisco here -3.5, and San Francisco straight up, regardless if it is Mac Jones for a third consecutive start or Brock Purdy coming back from a 2-week injury. So, then the next game, in a rematch of the AFC between two surprisingly 1-2 football teams, when the 1-2 Baltimore Ravens travel to Kansas City to take on the 1-2 Kansas City Chiefs. The Baltimore Ravens are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me, in an upset here, in a slight upset, I'm going to take Kansas City here, plus 2.5, and Kansas City straight up to win. Then the next game, when the 1-2 Chicago Bears travel to Las Vegas to take on the 1-2 Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders are 1-point favorites in this game. This game is essentially a pick'em. I'm going to take Chicago here in a slight upset here, +1, and Chicago straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-1 Green Bay Packers travel to Dallas, take on the 1-2 Dallas Cowboys. The Green Bay Packers are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Green Bay here -6.5, and Green Bay straight up. Then the next game, in the doubleheader for Monday night, when the 0-3 New York Jets, and talk about another weird AFC East battle for the first win supremacy, when the 0-3 New York Jets travel to Miami to take on the 0-3 Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Miami here -2.5, and Miami straight up. Then lastly, in the Monday night game at the other end at 8:15, when the 2-1 Cincinnati Bengals travel to Denver to take on the 1-2 Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Denver here -7, and Denver straight up. All right, time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Seattle Seahawks over the Arizona Cardinals. What I would tell everybody, ladies and gentlemen, is that the Seattle Seahawks are a very good, underrated team. Like, I think I said maybe, to people, I will acknowledge this. I thought the Seahawks going into the year were the 8th best team in the NFC. I thought they were just going to miss the playoffs, and they still might with how good the NFC is. But objectively, when I've watched the Seahawks in these 3 games, if it wasn't for Sam Darnold coughing the game up week 1, they could be a 3-0 football team. But I love how Seattle has been able to run the ball. Jackson Smith-Njigba's really proven to be one of the better receivers in the league, and he's proven to be, the clear number 1 receiver for the Seahawks. Kenneth Walker's been able to run effectively. That defense has been pretty much consistent and stout in all 3 levels. I think Jason Myers is a solid kicker, and you just watch the Seahawks. They took a Saints team that, including myself, that bought into, hey, they've been spunky the last couple weeks. Maybe they could cover a 7.5 point spread against a Seahawks team that people were kind of, a mixed bag about. Boy, was I wrong about that pick, because Seattle just boat raced them the whole game. And, that's what the Saints should have looked like through the first, few weeks of the season, because they're fighting for the number 1 pick for the league. But I'm going to go with Seattle here, because I think Seattle was just playing better, and Arizona's injuries, with defensive tackle injuries, with Will Johnson suffering an injury, James Conner, their starting running back, having a season-ending ankle injury. I think the Cardinals are just coming into this game. I know it's a home game for them, but it's a short week. I don't know if they're all going to be highly motivated, and I can't trust the Cardinals' offense. Trey Benson's a good rookie running back. I think he will play well. Outside of Marvin, who's kind of had an up and down run as the Cardinals wide receiver, he should be the number 1 wide receiver. I do not objectively think for Arizona, I'm just not sold that in this current state. I think the Seahawks are just playing better. They're more consistent. I trust their coach better. And I think Sam Darnold has better weapons and a better offensive scheme system to work with than I think Kyler Murray does with this current Cardinal regime. Could the Cardinals win this game? Absolutely. The Cardinals defense is, they have talent just like the Seahawks defense does. And, you can look at 2 defensive-based minds going at it. But with what I've seen with the talent and the health of the structure with the offensive line, with the defensive back injury, Will Johnson, with all these injuries, I think Seattle's just healthier, playing more consistent, and I'm going to trust Mike McDonald in this coaching matchup to outdo Jonathan Gannon in a competitive NFC West game to start out Week 4. Should be a good one. Wouldn't be that surprised if Arizona pulled out the win, but I'm going to take Seattle. Healthier, better coach, consistent running game. Hopefully Charbonnet can get healthy, and a little bit healthier of an offensive line. So, but that's why I'm taking Seattle here +1 and Seattle straight up. The next game, the Minnesota Vikings over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This game to me comes down to, I want to apologize, and I feel terrible for everyone that got swindled by the Cincinnati Bengals. Everybody thought Jake Browning, who had been in 7 starts, but we had seen the week before, put up an absolute dreadful performance that the Jags coaching staff bailed him out on. The Cincinnati Bengals got absolutely pantsed, housed, any embarrassing, derogatory, butt-kicking word you want to mention. I feel terrible for all the people that took Cincinnati, because you look like morons. You look like dummies. Fortunately, I was not one of those people. But when I look at what the Vikings did here is the biggest issue I have. Okay? They have to keep going with Carson Wentz. And look, I'm a J.J. McCarthy guy. I liked him coming out. I got high, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, off the 1 quarter out of 4. That last quarter, that was too good of a high. And then I watched week 2, and I was like, well, okay, that high went over, and, But then he got hurt, and I'm just watching Carson Wentz, and I'm like, this offense is humming. This offense can run. This offense can move. And the reason why I'm going with the Vikings is just that the Pittsburgh Steelers should really be a 1-2 football team. If you watch that game against the Patriots, the Pats were moving the ball up and down the field with limited weapons, and they're getting Jordan Addison back this week, which is huge for the Vikings receiving core. And if it wasn't for the 5 sacks and multiple turnovers, the Pats had a bunch of Butterfingers up in Boston, Butterfinger Boston Patriots. The Patriots would have won that football game. And I just know with the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, and I know Carson's had times, but I can look at that Steeler defense and go, okay, that Viking offensive line should be able to do enough, and I just don't think Aaron Rodgers going up against that Vikings defense, he was in London last year playing that same Brian Flores-based defense, and he looked awful. And you could argue the Steelers and the Jets rosters, if Aaron being older, they're about the same. Where you have one legitimate wide receiver, and I know Devontae came later, but like I'm going to literally be watching almost a carbon copy, maybe just with Mike Tomlin instead of Robert Saleh, so they might look a little bit better. But I'm just looking at this Vikings team with Carson Wentz and going, okay, Carson should be able to, if he doesn't turn the ball over, play an effective, managed game that he should be able to win. Because the Pittsburgh defense has been terrible. It hasn't been a good defense, and I just don't think Rodgers is going to play nearly as well. And it was like also the first time in his career that Aaron Rodgers had 2 consecutive games, or 2 with an interception. So, he's playing well, but it's not nearly what the or what the Steeler fans expected from him at this point. If Carson turns into a bot, or the Steelers can get through the banged up Vikings offensive line, this game could be competitive, but I just think the Vikings better defense. We saw this game against the Jets similar last year, just instead of England, it's Ireland, and I think the Vikings are playing better, and they're getting Addison back, which adds another weapon for Carson Wentz to use among this group. So, but that's why I'm taking Minnesota here, -2.5, and Minnesota straight up. The next game, the Washington Commanders over the Atlanta Falcons. This one to me comes down to the Atlanta Falcons were an abject failure on Sunday afternoon. How can you have all this supposed talent and objectively look that inept? They didn't get the ball past the Panthers' 30-yard line for 3 hours. That is just a new level of ineptitude. Remember, this was a team that drafted 2 first-round edge rushers that were playing a Panthers offensive line that didn't have 2 starters. Corbett and I think Hunt, they're on the IR. And the Falcons, I think, pressured Bryce Young 2 snaps the entire game. And I just look at the Falcons, and I'm looking at Michael Penix with kind of the rock eyebrow going like, I know, you can say, oh, we're judging early. He's had 2 solid games. Again, the Viking game, he didn't play well. He was sub-mid. He only threw for 130 yards. That was a Bijan and a John Parker Romo game. And maybe you could argue after John Parker Romo won the game for them the week before with the 5 field goals, he basically cost them the game when he couldn't hit the 1 at the beginning of the game. But I'm just going to take the Commanders here. I do think Jaden Daniels should be back, but I'm just going to mention, the Commanders ran the ball incredibly well. Bill Merritt, a good running back. And Chris Rodriguez having that phenomenal 60-yard touchdown run. The Commanders were able to run the ball effectively. Mariota, I do think the McLaurin injury is going to be interesting. He left the game with a quad injury. Hopefully he can play. But I think with Debo, I think with Luke McCaffrey, with Zach Ertz, I think the Commanders have enough weapons that they can win this game with Mariota playing a similar type of way. The Commanders' defense, I guess talent-wise, they still have Bobby, they still have Duran, they still have talent in areas, but I just think the Falcons look so bad. And the Falcons, home field advantage, to be fair, isn't the most pristine or the most scary in the league. The Falcons, lost one of their home games already this year, to the Bucs in a tight one. I just think I just trust the Commanders' coaching staff. In a game where the Falcons had to fire their receivers coach, this Falcon offense, with as much talent as people suppose they have, I don't think it's that good. And I've never thought the Falcons, even with the talent they have been that good. They've missed Caleb McGarry on the right tackle side, and I just think the Falcons, just vibe wise, I just trust Dan Quinn's mentality. I trust Dan Quinn's ability with Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt to just put up a good game plan against the Falcons team that's just a bunch of names but with no identity. That's what the Falcons are. The Falcons have a bunch of talented guys but have no identity to speak of or competency to speak of when you watch their games. So, again, could the Falcons, if they can get pressure or the Commanders' offensive line has a type of game like they did against the Packers, yeah, sure. But I think Jaden should be able to move around and make good some good plays, and I think Jaden's playmaking ability alone should be able to outdo Michael Penix in a rematch of the. Well, I guess LSU didn't make the playoffs, but this is LSU Washington type seasons from a couple years ago, and I think where Daniels won the Heisman, I think he's just on a better constructed roster with the ability to run, and I just can't trust the Falcons defensively to hold up against the Commanders team that just has more offensive firepower and more offensive talent around it than what I've seen out of the Falcons. So that's Washington minus 2.5 and Washington straight up. The next game, the Buffalo Bills over the New Orleans Saints. This is the easiest game of the week. Buffalo is the best team in the AFC. I would argue they're the best team in the NFL, or the second best team in the NFL behind the Philadelphia Eagles. And I just think for the Saints, they finally showed that after 2 weeks of having competitive games, the Saints are more I think that 38-7 type team than the one that they the last couple weeks. I think this game is not even going to be a contest. James Cook should be able to run through that entire defense. Josh Allen should be able to make throws and runs against the Saints defense that let everybody on Seattle make plays. Matt Prater's done well kicking. And I honestly don't think this game really, there's not a lot to talk about here. If the Saints pull off an upset, it'd be the biggest upset of the year, one of the biggest in recent, football history, memory. The only reason I'm going with the Saints to 16.5 is I will give the Saints their credit. I think, and after what I saw to Miami, is that if the Saints can play competent, managing-esque football, and they can keep the ball on third down to keep the Bills' offense off the field, I think the Saints can cover the 16.5 points, and that's just the margin of points that I just cannot objectively. After trying 12.5 in Miami, I can't objectively take 16.5 with the confidence I have, the confidence I had in Miami compared to New Orleans. So that's Buffalo here to win straight up, and New Orleans plus 16.5. The next game, the Detroit Lions over the Cleveland Browns. This game, to me, when you look at the Browns and the Lions, the Detroit Lions got one of the more impressive wins of the entire season by going into Baltimore last night and beating the Ravens 38-30. They were the first team in, I believe, 8 years to have two 96-yard drives. They outrushed the Ravens by 140 yards. They did not get the Lions' offensive line stopped the Ravens' streak of 37 consecutive games without a sack. The Lions were able to convert every fourth down. The Lions showed you in one of the biggest spots of the year after the 2 weeks they had, to where you had a Jekyll and Hyde performance, to where week 1 they looked like absolutely terrible, and you were like, okay, the Ben Johnson problem is there. To week 2, where it was they got to take it out on Ben Johnson. To week 3, where you're like, okay, John Morton seems to know what he's doing with this offense and the talent that he has, and the Lions are a genuine team in the NFC to move forward with. However, just to be fair, after what the Packers did in the first couple weeks, and then they played the Browns scare me because that Browns defense, Jim Schwartz, is having a tremendous year with all the defensive talent he has on that defense. That defense, basically outside of the game against Baltimore, have kept the Browns in every single one of the games they have played. Flacco's been doing enough. He's turned it over a few too many times for my liking. But the Browns defense, and it feels very similar. The Lions getting a big, combo 4-day stretch of beating the Lions and Commanders, two respectable teams. They have to go into Cleveland, and they play a Cleveland team with a defense that was just unrelenting on that Packers offensive line. No couple of the offensive linemen, got hurt. Also, the idiotic tackle that said, "Hey, we could go undefeated." You moron. Do not say that talk, until you get double-digit wins. If you get to 10-0, then you can start maybe talking about it a bit. I wouldn't be doing it now because I just think it's idiotic. But I think the biggest difference between the Lions and the Packers is the Lions have a better offensive line. I think the Lions have a better offensive line. They have a better way to move the ball and get Montgomery and Gibbs running effectively. And I think the Lions' defense with Kelvin Shepard, with how bad that Browns offensive line has been at times, I think they can get a good, significant pass rush on Joe Flacco. And I think Jared Goff's a little more mobile than Joe Flacco, and Jared Goff just seems to have better talent around him to make plays in this game. Like, the Browns could maybe shock the world again. They played an NFC North team last week that everybody thought really highly of, and they won by a field goal off the 55-yard, which for him, the kicker that missed the extra point and the field goal in week 1, what a great redemption moment for him. But, again, when I look at the Lions, better offensive line, Sonic and Knuckles should be able to run through the Browns defense a little more effectively, and I just think Jared Goff will have cleaner pockets and more time to throw and be more consistent compared to what happened with the Packers. If the Browns defense can clamp down, or, the Lions offense looks exactly like it did week 1, I think Cleveland has a chance to win this game. Cleveland very easily through the first 2 weeks should be a 2-1 football team, which would be, I think, even more shocking than what you've seen out of Indianapolis, which probably for a lot of people has been the biggest shock of the year in terms of positive way. But I just think, again, the Lions, they're not overlooking anything. I think they know what's at stake here because they know they got a game with the Chiefs coming. Like, they have a game against the Bengals and the Chiefs. Like, the Lions have some big opportunity moments to look forward to, and I don't think they're going to sleep on either of these teams going into that Chief game. Then, the Lions at home, better crowd, better talent on the offensive line that should prevent the Browns pass rush being that significant of a factor. And I think Jared Goff plays a good enough game to outdo Joe Flacco in a grimy, gritty game that's very fitting for the Motor City. So that's why I like Detroit here straight up, but Cleveland plus 7.5. The next game, the New England Patriots over the Carolina Panthers. This game to me comes down to, I just think the Patriots have been better. Like, the Panthers, at least through 3 games. I know they're both 1 and 2, and you can give if you're saying who has been more dominant at their apex, it's been Carolina because they're just coming off one of their first 30-point wins in over 10 years. But I think the Patriots so far have played more competitive and more consistent football than what I've seen out of the Panthers. Like, that first game against Jacksonville, they really weren't even competitive. The Cardinal game, the Cardinals were going up and down the field, and Bryce had 2 back-to-back turnovers, and for about 75% of the game, the Cardinals were rolling through the Carolina Panthers until the Cardinals kind of let go of the rope to put the Panthers 1 play away from tying or winning the game. And again, it's New England. They have a turnover problem. They had a bunch of turnovers and picks, and I think the Panthers defense, who got 2 big picks on Michael Penix, they could get more, turnover-worthy plays from Drake May. But in this kind of environment with the rosters they have, the coaching disadvantage or the coaching differences, I'm going to take the Pats at home. I think the one thing you need to do is do not give Ramondre Stevenson the football. That man can't hold on to the ball to save his life. But yeah, in this game, I'm going to take New England, better coach staff, more consistent running, and I think that Falcon-Panther game was more of a blip in how of a bad a team Atlanta is than actually what Carolina has shown through at least the first few weeks. I wouldn't be that surprised that Carolina won, because again, they're both 1 and 2 teams, and you kind of can look at their stretches of games and go like, okay, they've been competitive, they've had good moments, they've had bad moments, but I just think I've seen out of the Pats with Drake May, it's been a little bit more consistent and reliable, especially at home, than what I've seen out of the Panthers. So that's why I like New England here minus 5.5, and New England straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Chargers over the New York Giants. This game to me, again, I'm not going to... Very easy. Chargers have the number 1 defense. The Chargers, to me, are the second best team in the AFC. They have played consistent, very good John Harbaugh-based football. Justin Herbert is in the MVP conversation. Quentin Johnston's finally looking like the number 1 draft pick. They drafted him at wide receiver 4. And I just think the other issue is the Giants, just about an hour ago, announced that Russell Wilson, the former 10-time Pro Bowl quarterback, has been benched for first-round pick Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. And I think the thing I will say about this very quickly is that the Giants made a mistake in this regard. I knew that Russell Wilson has played terrible football outside of the Cowboys game, but think about it, the Cowboys defense is just that bad where everybody's going to look like Russell Wilson against the Cowboys. But the fact that they said, and Brian Daboll, Brian Daboll, a guy that is literally grasping at straws with Joe Shane to keep his job, thought it was a great idea that, hey, let's put this kid in against the #1 defense in the NFL over the past 2 seasons as his opening game was idiotic foresight. Like I said, the Chargers, look, best wishes to Najee, but they have Amari on Hampton, that's why they drafted him. The Chargers just are fundamentally better at every single position at coach. And I think this is one of the, if you're picking a survivor pool, take the Chargers this week. I put all the money down. The Chargers or Bills. If you want to take a lesser team, take the Chargers. But because, again, this game I don't think is going to be that entertaining of a contest. Though I do want to shout out Keenan Allen for having a career resurgence, or having a much better year than what he had in Chicago last year. But the Giants coaching staff, Brian Daboll, should get lit like a Bunsen burner, a flamethrower. Jackson Dart needs to look like the quarterback that they drafted him to be. Because Brian Daboll, in my opinion, deserves no pass. He doesn't deserve the, rookie shucks. Okay, kid, you're part of the Ole Miss Lane Kiffin tree. And anybody out there, does anybody remember the last great Ole Miss quarterback out there? Like, this is an idiotic decision by an absolute dolt of a coach that Josh Allen's proven he carried Brian Daboll to a job. And also, Danny Dimes, that everybody in New York was laughing at, when you get him with an actual offensive coordinator in Shane Steichen, he's not maybe Danny Dowler's fully back, but we got to go back to Danny Half-Dollars, the Danny JFK half-dollar bills, the half-dollar coins, because that's how inept and stupid Ryan Daboll is. Okay? I am not saying that Russell Wilson should have been the starter the rest of the year. But you pick this game against that defense, against that talent. Just imagine if Khalil Mack was there. Just imagine, they are going to kick the ever-living crap out of the guy. And I'm like, yeah, great job, Brian. Way to go. So, like I said, this to me, Jackson Dart's got to look like the man. And I know you can say I'm being harsh or, and people watch me like, oh, you're a big Russ guy and you're just being, and you can call me that, sure, I'll admit that. But I'm like, okay, Dart, you got to hit the bullseye. You are the dart. There's the board. Here's what you have to hit. If he is the dart, here's the board. You have to hit like this. Bullseye. Because if you're high, low, anywhere in between, or if you're Stevie Wonder, or anybody trying to, you're not Mike Tyson, who can throw apparently 3 bullseyes blindfolded. This is going to go awful and objectively terrible, and I feel terrible for that kid, but I think Brian Daboll should get eviscerated for making that kid take an absolute tar and feathering by the Chargers defense. So, but that's why I like the Chargers here, -6, and the Chargers straight up. Sorry for my little diatribe there, but I didn't think there was that much of a talk about the game. So, the next game, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This game to me comes down to the Philadelphia Eagles showed in that second half for the first time that their offense could actually move the ball through the air. It was amazing. They went 10 quarters. Jalen Hurts finally threw a touchdown. But it was just amazing that they finally realized, hey, we got A.J. Brown. We have 2 very good receivers. We have Dallas Goedert, a respectable tight end. And our offensive line, even though Lane Johnson didn't leave the game of a stinger injury, it just, we can move the ball through the air. We can take shots because the Rams don't really have a secondary. Their best corner went down of a, broken clavicle on Ahkello Witherspoon. And I just think, and again, it came down to incredible special teams plays by Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. And thank you, Jordan Davis, by the way, for letting me cover that Eagles game. I know if that was a terrible beat. I feel terrible for all the people that took the Rams with the points because you basically got screwed at the very end. But I'm going to, the Eagles just feel like to me, even though the Lane injury is something to monitor for, the rest of the season or for the next little bit, I think the Eagles are just more complete. And the Bucs, the Bucs are the second best team. I think they played very good, consistent football. I thought Drew Brees said one of the dumbest things imaginable when he said that he thought that the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were basically the same team, except that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were able to finish games. compared to the Saints. I'm like, Drew, that's a big freaking thing. That's a big deal that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were able to finish games compared to the Eagles. But I look at the Tampa defense and I go, the secondary's getting banged up. Well, the defensive line with Clancy being out is huge. The offensive line, I think that Eagles defense should have a great time getting through the pass rush. And then the other big thing why I'm taking the Eagles is Mike Evans being out. He has a apparently mild to moderate hamstring strain that's probably going to cost him at least multiple weeks of the year or next few weeks. Fortunately for them, Chris Godwin should be coming back maybe this week, so that might offset it a bit. But I do think for the Philadelphia Eagles, they're just healthier, and I think the offensive line with Fred Johnson should be able to hold up against a weakened Tampa Bay pass rush. Even though Hassan Reddick does get to take on his former team, which I know he'll be motivated for that. And I know Tampa's history against Philadelphia. Tampa, over the last several years, have been able to beat Philadelphia on a pretty consistent basis in the Jalen Nick era. But I just think this time around with the questionable, injury health in Tampa's offensive line and receiving core of Mike Evans being out, I just think the Eagles can get some redemption. I think they're healthier, they're more sound, and I think Jalen should be able to kind of lift the momentum from week 3 on to week 4, starting more effectively on the offense. I just also think, again, with the way the Eagles have their offensive line in Saquon, every team that I've seen so far has basically sold out to stop Barkley. And the issue for me with that is saying, you have this weaker secondary. You do have, the Tampa Bay secondary that's had moments where Nico's burned one of their corners. You've had Michael Penix and Bijan. You've had the secondary have consistent, big plays of, drives or just getting off a third down. And I just think the Eagles offense, taking that momentum from week 3, they should be able to carry that into week 4 to get a win against the Tampa team that's still very good and could, very well be competitive. I'm going to take Tampa with the 3.5 just because of the history. But I'm going to take the Eagles, healthier team, more consistent. I just feel like they have the juju and the confidence that they will make the plays or the other teams will make mistakes compared to Tampa at this point this week. So that's why Tampa Bay here, plus 3.5 and Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the Houston Texans over the Tennessee Titans. This game to me comes down to the Tennessee Titans have, from what I've heard from prominent Tennessee Titans content creators, also shout out by the way, I'm not getting paid for this. Shout out to anybody out there. Check out Sports Fan Entertainment, the MJ Take. He has great Titans content, and also check on the Locked On podcast network. There is a great guy there that I've been entertained by. His name is Tyler Rowland. I think his handle is Tic Tac Titans. He does a great job doing film studies and constant video content for the Tennessee Titans. But I've been watching his stuff, and I've seen what Brian Callahan has done as the head coach of the Titans, and it's some of the saddest, dumbest, oddest stuff that I have seen. And this game, because it's hard because the Texans' offense has been one of the worst in the league. But I just think when you have a coaching matchup between the Miko Ryans and Brian Callahan, and with the talent the Texans do have, the Texans should be able to win this game. I think this game is going to be low scoring, and I will give the Titans their credit. When they played a more weaker offense, they kept it within 8 points, and I have had no faith in Houston being able to run the ball, anybody outside of Nico Collins getting open for them, and that Texan defense will keep them in the game. I just think at the end of the day, it's going to come down. I think D'Amico makes Brian Callahan will make 1 or 2 or 3 bad decisions that give the Texans opportunities to win the game that they need to. Because the Texans being 0-3 is one of the more surprising things that has happened this entire season, in my opinion. Because, look, I had them being 1-2, but I thought after these 2 weeks, I thought they were going to start their AFC South campaign with a bang, and they were going to start making a roll. If they lose this one here, they're done, and they are probably not going to make the playoffs at 0-4, which could be one of the more jarring surprises of the entire year. And I think the Texans really have to reevaluate and question what is their ceiling moving forward. So, again, I think this game can be more competitive just because I think the Texans' offense has been that inept. But in this type of game, I'm just going to take D'Amico and his defense, especially with how many times Cam Ward has gotten sacked, behind the Titans' offensive line for playing backups instead of J.C. Latham and I forget the other one, but I know Latham's been out. And also Dan Moore, the big $80 million free agent they signed. He's going up against Will Anderson now, so he's going to look more like the bot that we've all seen Dan Moore look like through the first couple weeks. And I just think the Texans grind out a tough, low-scoring game that I think Brian Callahan will cost the Titans more than I think the Texans offense will be able to move the ball. So, but that's all like Houston here straight up at Tennessee +7. The next game, the Los Angeles Rams over the Indianapolis Colts. This game to me comes down to I'm taking the Rams based on the fact that the Colts, where they have played very well, and you can make the point today, in my opinion, they are the third best team in the AFC behind the Los Angeles Chargers and the Buffalo Bills through the first 3 weeks of the year, if you're just objectively looking at the year. This is the Waterloo moment for the Indianapolis Colts. They have played the Titans, the Broncos, and the Dolphins. 2 of those teams are winless, and one of those teams only has 1 win, and if Draymond Jones doesn't use leverage, the Colts lose that game. So, for the Colts, they're playing a Rams team that just played the Super Bowl champions and collapsed a 19-point game that Sean McVay, I think, has never done in his career. This Rams team is legit. In my opinion, they are the second best team, or second or third best team in the NFC. If you're going, big picture, I take the Rams second. If you're talking about going into week 4, I will give the Niners their due as of this moment. But I'm sorry. I will I saw about the NFC. I think the Rams are definitive. I think personally they're the third best team in the NFC as of this moment. Objectively, you're looking at it from a week-to-week basis. They probably should be 4 because they did end up losing that game. But I think this Rams game, it's very weird. It's very weird because it kind of has the vibe where the Colts are like the Rams in their first year in LA. Because remember, this is a rematch of Sean McVay's first ever game. And I remember making that pick years ago, and I took the Colts to win because I was like, I don't know what this coach is going to do. I don't know what this team is going to do. And I feel like for the Colts, this is their moment to show the NFL world that we belong in the top conversation. If the Colts win this game, they are in the top conversation with the Chargers and the Bills. They have entered that room. I think the Colts are going to be a playoff team if they play well. Like, credibility will come for the Colts if they play well and lose, or if they win the game. I just think against this Rams team, it might be midnight for the Colts as genuine, higher than punching weight limits team. Like, I think the Colts are showing you that they're a good team. They probably could be a playoff team at this rate with the way they're playing and the opponents they're playing. But in terms of Super Bowl or multiple playoff win team, this is the moment to where you can either say that is completely on the board or that is off the board entirely, depending on the game. And the fraudness will come out if the Rams blow them out from pillar to post. So, we shall see. But that's all I like the Los Angeles Rams here, -3.5, and Los Angeles Rams straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm taking San Francisco here based on coaching. Objectively, the Jags have been healthier. Objectively, the Jags have played a little bit more consistent ball, and I just, they had a lot of great turnovers. The Jaguars defensive coordinator should deserve the MVP for the game, getting, the 3 to 4 turnovers that kept the Texans out of the end zone and out of the opportunities to win the game. Cam Little making kicks, good for him. But the reason why I'm going with the 49ers here is coaching. I just think Kyle Shanahan, for me right now, would be my coach of the year because I feel like the injuries he's already had to deal with to Brock Purdy, to George Kittle, to Brandon Ayuk, to Nick Bosa now, to, other corners, losing some of the talent they have, reshuffling the offensive line. He has done a masterful job getting this team to a 3-0 record on a consistent basis. I would tell you that the 49ers, I think, do have a credibility issue because the teams that they played, but this was the advantage of the Niners' schedule, is that they only can play who they can play, and they're winning games on a consistent basis. Ironically, for the Niners, they get to play the Rams next Thursday in LA to start Week 5, which would be kind of interesting. That could be a huge divisional game, to get the Rams back on track. Rams started, but I just feel like with the Niners, you have to give that coaching staff, especially Robert Saleh, who I ridiculed tremendously over the years as he was the coach of the Jets. He has fit right back in to the Niners culture as a defensive coordinator, and I think Kyle should be thrilled because he now has a DC for the rest of his career as long as they are there. But I think the Niners are in a great position with their coach to beat a Jags team that could be 3-0, but could be 1-2 if a few different things happen. And I just think, again, the Niners just are going to play better. They have the better coaching staff. They still, I think, have the better defensive structure. And I think the Niners just have the better brain trust. And in games where rosters are even, injuries are, kind of siding that way, I'll take Shanahan to outcoach the Duval man and Liam Cohen. So, that's all like San Francisco here, -3.5. It's San Francisco straight up. The next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Baltimore Ravens. This one to me, and I was thinking to myself all week as I watched the Giants game against the Chiefs, like, the Ravens should be able to go into Kansas City for the first time in a very long time. Because remember, Lamar Jackson has only one career, regular and post, season win against Patrick Mahomes. He's never beaten him in Kansas City. But after watching that Ravens defense, which right now is the worst defense statistically in the league, maybe outside of Miami, what I came down to after watching that game was, what do I have more faith in? Do I have more faith in the Chiefs, who, have not been able to move the ball, but to move the ball with Patrick Mahomes against this porous, Swiss cheese, wide gaping open hole defense the Ravens have? Or do I have confidence that the Ravens, will not have a turnover, or will not get a stop at a critical spot, or Derrick Henry will not fumble the ball at a key point? It just came down to me where I'm like, the Chiefs in this moment, with a significantly better defense, should be able to get one or two stops that we're not going to be able to match, and I think Patrick will make one or two more clutch plays, and he won't take sacks that Lamar did. Lamar took tied a career high with 7 sacks, and he ran into a few of those, which was crazy. But, and again, this is the one game I would tell every fan out there, this is what I'm going to call like the hangover regret pick, because I know the Ravens have been significantly better offensively. I know that, we blew a 15-point lead. We dominated the Brown team to just beat the Pack. Like, the Ravens have fundamentally, through 3 weeks, have played better, more consistent football on the offensive side, and some of the defensive side with the Cleveland game, than the Kansas City Chiefs have. But it's just the opponents. It's just the nature of, we can't generate a pass rush. This team has 3 sacks in 3 games, and we've had 1 pick the entire year. If you do not get Patrick Mahomes to turn the ball over against this porous defense, I just do not have faith that the Ravens could win a shootout with the Chiefs. Even with Patrick Mahomes, even with Xavier Worthy and Rice being out. And Worthy's probably going to come back this week. So if you had Worthy and Thornton and Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, they should be able to move the ball effectively. And we don't have Matapike, best wishes to him with his neck injury. But I just don't think this Chief team, I don't think this Raven team doesn't realize that we are not back in the 2000s Ravens defense-esque day to where, if we compare that defense to that offense, we would go 18-0 if we compare this offense with that defense. But in this game, I'm just going to, I'm going to take the better coached team, the more cultured team, and the better defense at home to beat a Raven team that, we could put up 30 points. We'll probably give up 34 to Mahomes and them. So, should be a great game. And again, this is one pick I would say, the Ravens on paper, they're 2.5-point favorites on the road to Kansas City, which tells you how bad the Chiefs' offense has been, that people believe in the Ravens that much. But I'm going to take the Chiefs here. Better defense, more consistent culture, and I think Patrick Mahomes will have to deal with less pressure and be able to make more plays compared to what the Ravens are going to deal with Lamar Jackson and that Spags blitzing front. So that's what I can't see here, plus 2.5, and Kansas City straight up. The next game, the Chicago Bears over the Las Vegas Raiders. This one comes down to me where Caleb Williams and that Bears offense looked alive, and the Raiders defense just sucks. I It was funny. Like, I got a kick out of everybody taking Mariota. Or taking the Raiders. Like, oh, Geno! Oh, great! You know. And again, I knew Geno threw for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. But in every meaningful moment of the game, Geno was running around. Brendan Carroll's a terrible running back coach. Terrible offensive line coach. He needs to probably move on because, like, Ashton Genty's not running the ball nearly as much as they need him to or effectively. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what do I trust more? Do I trust that the Bears can gain some of the confidence against the Raiders? You know, like, and again, the Raiders could win this one. Caleb could struggle. You know, he could throw picks. That Bears offensive line could be a turnstile. Who knows? But from what I've seen out of both games, I'm going to trust Ben Johnson and his forward-thinking offense against a bad Raider defense compared to what I saw in Vegas, that's seeing more of a Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly run-based offense that won't be able to move the ball that effectively. So that's all I like. Chicago here +1 and Chicago straight up. The next game, the Green Bay Packers over the Dallas Cowboys. I am taking the Green Bay Packers here based on the fact that the Cowboys objectively just have no defense. And I feel so bad for the Dallas Cowboys because the worst thing that could have happened to them was that the Green Bay Packers would have lost to the lowly Cleveland Browns. Because that means there are a lot of angry Packers players, Packers fans that want to take it out. And also, you know, and again, I know I'm bearing the lead. The big story is this is Micah's return to Dallas with an offensive line that just lost Tyler Booker for multiple weeks with a high ankle sprain. CeeDee Lamb has a high ankle sprain. Kenny Clark left the game with an injury. LeBron Bland has a foot injury. Trayvon Diggs left the game with an injury. Like, this Cowboys defense is ravaged. This Cowboys offense, I think, is going to not have any way to move the ball. And I just think it's going to be a brutal and long day for the Cowboys in Jerry World in this current situation. If somehow the Cowboys defense can hold or can limit Josh Jacobs with the talent they have, they don't nearly have the talent the Browns do defensively. Maybe they could be in a game because the Packers receivers haven't made that much of an impact. But from what you've seen out of the Dallas Cowboys defense in at least the last couple weeks has just been blown assignments, bad tackling, incredible mismanagement. And I just think the Packers, with that anger and the motivation, the Micah motivation, should go into Dallas. And again, Jordan Love and the Packers have never lost in the AT&T Stadium since Jerry Jones has built that building. I think with the roster, the motivation, I think they go into Dallas and get another nice, easy steamroll win against the Cowboy team that'll be licking its wounds and saying that, man, we should be 500. We played a good game against the Eagles, but now we have to play a Jets team that will be very interesting to see if they can kind of go back and forth with the Jets in a weird shootout next week. So that's like Green Bay here, -6.5, and Green Bay straight up. Then the final two games, the Miami Dolphins over the New York Jets. This one comes down to me where I'm going to take the Dolphins coaching staff over the Jets coaching staff. I think both teams are bad. Both teams have shown moments of competitive fight in 2 of the 3 games to an extent. But at the end of the day, when you see what the Jets are doing, when you hear Aaron Glenn talk about, hey, we're not the same old Jets, though when you have a block kick that switched it to a 1-point lead, and in the very next drive you give up a game-winning field goal after having that block kick, and you lose, and then you say you're not the same old Jets. Like, you still are the same old Jets, and I just am going to trust the Dolphins with what they've shown and the talent they have to be able to move up and down the field with Tyreek and Waddle and all those weapons against that terrible Jets defense. I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets won. I think Tyrod, like I said, Tyrod should be starting. Tyrod played a competent football game, but we'll see if Fields can pass concussion protocol. And I also just think Tua will outplay Fields, which can be kind of a sad moment. Like, this is like a weaker version of Texans-Titans, to where, like, the Jets and Dolphins, nobody really had any belief in at all. But I'm going to take Miami here, just based on them being at home, having the better coaching staff, and I just trust Tua and that offense to make more plays than what I've seen out of Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn's defense is going to make less stops than Tua's offense is going to be able to, generate points. So that's like Miami here -2.5, Miami straight up. And lastly, the Denver Broncos over the Cincinnati Bengals. I am taking the Denver Broncos here based on the fact that Jake Browning went back to a pumpkin. Jake Browning, the thing that you've noticed this year is he can definitely make throws and make plays, but he will also turn the ball over at an alarming rate. And the Broncos defense, to be fair, has had stretches during games where they've looked like a good defense. And I just think, again, like, you do have to worry about Jamar, you do have to worry about T. But Jake Browning's such a turnover machine that I think the Broncos should be able to get opportunities to get scoop and scores, turnovers, then they're not going to be able to move the ball effectively enough to get them in position. And I just think Bo Nix should be outplaying Jake Browning at this point. I think for the Bengals, if Jake Browning has another meltdown game, you have to talk to the New York Giants about Jameis Winston. You have to talk about them about Jameis Winston because you need a competent quarterback to play, or Zach Taylor, who nobody really likes at this point and nobody's going to give any context to. He's on the hot seat for a team that objectively you could just say has thrown the year with the Joe Burrow injury, but that's just not going to help Zach Taylor's case at all because I just feel like it's never going to maybe get better with how they've worked on the offensive line and the defensive struggles they've had over the years. So, should be an interesting game. Last year, Denver won the game. Or no, that was Denver-Cleveland. I guess, Denver-Cincinnati. That was one of the great games at the end of the year. I remember that was the 30-23 game where they won in overtime to keep their season going in Week 17. This game feels very different to where the Bengals feel like they're handicapped with Jake Browning. And I just think it's going to be a long, road for the Bengals the rest of the year as they keep going into the more competent quarterback play and just better defensive play all around. So that's like Denver here, -7, and Denver straight up. But that is it. So those are all my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page to go see other great prognosticators like Half Moon's Picks, Bridgewater's Finest, Sports Fan Entertainment, Fire and Brim Sports. A quick note for everyone. My video next week will probably come out Monday. I am off work, so my video will probably come out sometime next Monday afternoon. And I will make updates because there are 2 games. If there are any significant injuries that will impact my pick for those 2 games, I will let everybody know. Just to give an update since when the video is coming out. So, best of luck to all players, coaches, teams, fellow prognosticators, and fantasy football players. And until next week, everyone, this is Matt the NFL Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.